Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It's the week of October 10th, the 28th week in Ordinary Time. But Ann, this was no ordinary week. Thankfully, our Irish won, but your Giants did not. How are you?
Good. Well, let's be real clear, Haley. Like, the Giants did win Friday, and they lost last night. So they're 1-1. And so, yeah, for my Dodger friends, I guess sports fandom has a very short memory, but we have to think big picture. It's best of 5. So a friend said, the Giants are playing with house money. They won the NL West. They were never expected to go this far. So we're just trying to stay calm and keep it all in perspective. But yes, I was at the game last night. It was good to be there. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but yeah, postseason baseball is just so good. But yeah, today's show, we'll talk a little bit about just some events that maybe took up some of your time this week, related to, one of your passions and a huge part of your life, Notre Dame swimming, and then coaching. And I'll talk a little bit about Hall of Fame and that event and why it might be important for people. We'll talk a little bit about the gospel as it relates to our life, even today, 2,000 years later, and see what we come up with for our takeaways. So let's get started, Haley. Tell us about your week.
Yeah. So, Ann, last week you and I taped on Sundays. It's Sunday today. That's usually our day of taping. And then you and I had a call on Monday with some folks from ND, which was kind of fun to get to Zoom with you 2 days in a row. But right after that Zoom, there was some news that broke, at least in the Notre Dame world, that really kind of threw me for a loop and kind of created an interesting week for me. So it was announced last Monday that Notre Dame's head swim coach and associate head coach both resigned. So beginning of the season, just days before their first meet, they've been training. They went ahead and canceled the meet this past weekend. And it's an unfortunate situation all around. I don't know the details. I'm not sure I'm meant to know, and I'm not sure I need to know. But what I do know is that it's rattled the Notre Dame swimming world. Certainly all of us are, feel so badly for these student athletes who, really kind of had their world rocked. They only have 4 years as student athletes. If they were there last 2 years, of course, COVID kind of rocked their world. And now as we kind of move into a normal season, it's not normal. But it's rattled the alumni. I knew as soon as the news broke that I would hear from alumni, and I have, from the 80s, the 90s, and beyond. I think it speaks, of course, to Notre Dame and, the shared history that we all love so much. I think some of us can get too involved, so I get that too. Part of what I did this past week was kind of calm some people down and help them see that how we can be, helpful and supportive as alums. But it just keeps bringing me back to coaching. Clearly there's a reason that this head coach is no longer the head coach, and it's a coaching issue in whatever, shape or form that takes. And I also had a phone call from a good friend this week whose daughter recently quit her high school volleyball team. And, the mom was trying to figure out because of a coaching issue. And, she's trying to navigate, how does she help her daughter through that? And it comes back to this, why is it so hard to find good coaches? And it's not that any of these coaches aren't good, but they're clearly not effective, or they're not coaching in the way that, of course, I feel like my coach, Tim Welsh, did. I will say I really, really felt Tim's loss again this week. Just his absence in terms of, where we are with Notre Dame swimming. But here's my question for you, Ann, because I've asked this to myself so many times, and I want to ask our high schools this as well. Do you, at St. Francis, do you have a coaching handbook? Do you have coaching guidelines? Are there criteria that coaches have to follow? And then do you do professional development for your coaches? And now I'm not speaking about Notre Dame because I know Notre Dame does do all this.
Right.
I'm thinking more in terms of, the life I'm living, in the world of high school sports. It's really frustrating across the board, and I hear it from multiple high schools, the lack of professionalism in coaching.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things there, Haley.
I know.
Yeah, right. I work as assistant athletic director, so I definitely have a lot of thoughts in response. So yeah, anytime midseason that a coach leaves, it's just demoralizing. It's demoralizing to the athlete, to the coach, him or herself, and then also to the program. I mean, from the leadership side of it, you are scrambling. So, USC fired their head football coach like a couple, games in, and it's just what it does is it dramatically changes the season. The second point I would say is that any college athlete today has to know that his or her coach may leave. I think they should go in with that mentality, but that's not a one-way street. A lot of athletes transfer as well these days. True. So coaches know that they may lose their athletes, right? And, as a coach, you get who you get. You get the athletes you get to recruit them. In high school, you certainly do not. You get what's coming in. I mean, just as a small example, I'm already thinking of next year because you have to about my team. And I don't know that I'm going to bring anybody up to my varsity program. I don't see that ability on the JV level. We're going to do a lot in the off season to help these girls get to a place where they can compete on the varsity level, but I don't have to I can carry 6 girls if I want. I don't have to carry 9. I don't have to carry 10. So, you, as a high school coach, you get what you get, but yes, we absolutely have a handbook. I think that question is kind of funny because it's important, but it's also kind of sad that so much of our society now is bound by this, they call it the 4 corners, a contract. So what's in that contract? What's in the handbook? And I cannot tell you how many times this year I have said, well, I need to put that in the syllabus for next year. I need to add this for next year because it's not in writing when it's communicated during the season. And it's small things like, in golf, for example, parents can't be on the course. They cannot talk to their daughter. This is true in other sports, tennis, like parents are not allowed to talk to their child. And yet they do. And yet that can be penalized. So I have to be very clear on that. So all those things go into the handbook and professional development. I even love that you're asking the question. That means to me that you value the development professionally of a coach. And there's a lot of schools when it comes to budget, like that's not there. Maybe they have something to give. That's on the coach. On the collegiate level, these coaches are making much more money, but in the high school level, I mean, there's part of the answer is, how have they been developed professionally in order to coach?
Right.
I mean, this, just because you played a sport doesn't mean that you necessarily can coach it.
Right.
So we see this with, grade school kids, but then after a certain point, like there's really a skill set involved. Like my roommate at Notre Dame, her dad was like a championship 8th grade girls basketball coach in Denver. And I'm telling you, some of the plays he ran, he got girls, they're 13 and 14 years old, and they needed real skills. And it was awesome. He loved it. And he was a very good coach. So yeah, when you're paying somebody, 20, we joke about it. Like, don't even calculate what you're making an hour because it's less than minimum wage.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. First of all, so much there. Again, when I was the assistant dean of students at Xavier years ago, we used to always joke, you could put a name and an asterisk next to every rule that was in the handbook because it stemmed from something that some child or parent did, right?
Right.
And it gets thicker and thicker every year, and it's ridiculous. So I understand, totally get, you don't want to overregulate everything. But on the flip side, when it comes to coaching, and, I know, I tend to be very aware that I may overemphasize the role that sports play in a child's life. But a coach really has the ability or the influence to be a positive and a negative influence on a child's life.
Yes.
So it's so important to not overlook that, especially, with middle school or, high school, and they're at such an impressionable age. I think we need to really look at the coaching profession and not just put anybody who signs up. I mean, I coached my kids' soccer team when they were 4 because I could get them to all run around on the field and run and kick the ball towards the goal. But, once they needed to come up with plays or I needed to know what actually the positions were called, forget it. I was done by age 5. So I knew when to quit in that sense. But it's yes, I think coaches need to understand and appreciate the role and the impact and influence that they have on their student athletes. It's critical. I mean, it really, they make a huge impression. So
well, and I think one organization that aims to really do that is one you and I are familiar with, which is Play Like a Champion today. I mean, they really know that in CYO programs, or just local communities.
Yes.
Coaches are these people that you said, like looking at the coaching profession. They look at it from a holistic point of view. They have this acronym GROW, ownership, and, like just looking at some of the skills that, a coach ought to pass on. They have such an opportunity to form young people. I also think like collegiate coaches, I mean, the pressure to win and to deliver. But I think of myself at 18 and 19 and 20, you're still growing up. You're still being formed. And it's probably even more now, Haley, because we just see, I mean, I don't think it's, kids in some ways grow up faster, but in other ways they don't.
Right.
Like one example would be the number of kids that have a job today. Like jobs really give kids the opportunity to learn skills and be, self-advocates and different things. But a lot of kids don't have jobs. And that's, maybe they don't need to, maybe sports is their job. But as you were talking, I thought about catechism and teachers for catechism. I mean, we need good teachers for religious studies. And we see that it's the same thing. That person is providing incredible
guidance. Yeah.
But a lot of times they're just who's willing and able. So God bless them.
True.
Our parishes need to, invest in that too. So sports and spirituality, I think there's the both and.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm glad you made it to your Giants game last night. And so tell us what else is going on in San Francisco. It's Fleet Week.
Yeah. So Fleet Week is, I guess it's the only one that's happening in the United States this year. So it's a huge deal around here. The Blue Angels fly, they practice during the week. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they have an air show above, the bay. It's usually our best weather of the year. So it's awesome. And then, with the Giants in the postseason, there's just some excitement again. It's really fun to see people wearing orange and black. And obviously we call it Orange October here, and Halloween's on the way. So it's just good to have some buzz in the air, so to speak. So there's a lot of sailors, a lot of, Navy midshipmen and whatnot. And I was thinking of your plebes, and they're around. And the first 2 games for the Giants are at home. They'll be in LA the next 2 days. But it is nice just to have some of that again, right?
Yeah,
and we had
absolutely.
But one of the events I was able to go to this week, Haley, it's called the Hall of Fame Induction and Celebration. And this event was at Olympic Club, which is where I play golf, but it's also, there's a downtown gym, and they have a series of competitive sports. And they honored 6 different individuals, and 2 of them have already died. And then 3 are, so one was like a track star from the 20s. One was a woman who joined the club in maybe 94, and she was already 68 years old. And she became a great open water swimmer. And she competed like incredibly well for about 15 years. And her daughter took the award in honor of her. It was so inspiring to hear these stories of men and women. One was a handball player, I felt like, in these times, there's so much it's just, these are tough times. Like if it's not, somebody telling me how our gas prices and food prices are going up, it's, things about social media, like its effect on girls, as we know, with the study at the Wall Street Journal and Facebook and Instagram, and just living with the reality of all that. So it's just so easy to get caught up in the things that are hard. And just to hear these simple stories of men and women and their success, but it's not just them who speak, it's always who helped them along the way,
Yeah.
their coaches, their parents. Like one woman is a golfer, she's a doctor, and she's just an incredible person. Like she's not an ordinary person. She is wonderful and gracious, but also like she's really accomplished some big things in her life. And for me, that's inspiring. And I thought it's so simple, but it's just people telling their stories and us gathered to celebrate that. So whatever form that takes in your life or whatever it could be, I think that's one, I don't know, answer to what do you do when you see the tough things in life. Look for those stories. And
Yeah, and we need to tell more stories like that. It's just, you're right. There is a lot of hurt in the world and a lot of people who are struggling, but there's still so much goodness, right? And I always say that's the challenge for us every day is you wake up and we all have something negative we could focus on. But when you hear more stories like that, it becomes a little easier to wake up in the morning and find the goodness that's out there. And
Yeah.
that leads me to my spiritual stew. And one of the things that's really been kind of on my mind this week, one of the gospels last week was Mark 10, 2-16, where Jesus is asked, is it lawful for a husband to divorce his wife? And of course, Jesus responds, basically no, and has the words that we hear so often at wedding ceremonies, which is therefore what God has joined together, no man must separate. And this was very timely for me, not personally, but I have 3 close friends who over the past probably 4 months have shared that they are going through a divorce and or are choosing to leave their husband, or their husband has been unfaithful and they're struggling with that. Do I stay? Do I go? And, of course, as her friend of this one particular friend, her husband has been unfaithful for several years, multiple times. And I'm like, yes, you should go. Why would you, you've spent 25 years with him. I get that's hard to leave, but he's never been faithful to you. So you're not even 50 years old. You've got so many great years ahead of you. Why would you? Yeah. So it's easy, for me as an outsider, to have that perspective. But, it speaks to this, Jesus is telling us, no, what God has joined together, no human must separate. But is that still applicable? And these are very faith-filled women. These are women that go to mass every week, who take these readings very seriously, who took their vows very seriously.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately their husbands have not, for whatever reason. And of course, divorce is a two-way street. It's very rarely one-sided. So, and they all know that there's nothing, that there's not just always one side to blame. You might have one side to blame more than others. But blame aside, it's a really unfortunate, sad situation. And I know a lot of Catholics and probably a lot of Christians who, fundamentally don't believe in divorce from a religious standpoint struggle with this. They're hurting. The marriage is broken. Perhaps it wasn't even entered into, with a pure heart. So, I've just really been thinking about that because I was raised that way too. You get married and you stay married and you figure it out no matter what. And, I've had some family members go through divorce and I've seen them all come out happier and healthier on the other side. And that was very transformative for me to understand and realize, there are some cases where divorce is what's better for everyone. But then you go back to, but is that truly what we're called to do? So just struggling with this, but it's really hard to see friends hurting like this and staying in marriages that are really unhealthy.
Yeah. No, I don't know anyone who hasn't been affected in some way by divorce, and it is tragic. And I've had, family members myself, but also friends who said, even if the marriage was really hard and it's ultimately for the best, they've all said how hard it is, right? Even when it's better on the other side, so to speak. But I think a couple of things, like one, when we were talking about coaching, I was thinking about you just don't know if you are having an impact on young people, and you don't know if you're doing the right thing half the time. And it's kind of a mystery. It's a leap of faith, right? You just do your best and you hope. And I think about, I'm not married, but think about relationships and I think about the call to marriage, like, how is it two people are drawn together and that they make this huge step? It's a total leap of faith, and it takes a lot of faith in another person and yourself to sustain that in light of all the forces that are against it. And you don't know. I mean, that's the thing, right? You are calculated risk, as they say, and you don't know that this person will disappoint you and be unfaithful, but people still go into it. And I do appreciate that the church believes in the sanctity of marriage,
Yes.
because I do think in society people are too casual about it.
Yes.
It's not that 50% of all people get divorced. It's 50% of marriages end in divorce. I think it's like 40%, because once you get married and then divorced, the likelihood of you getting divorced again, because again, you compromise the sanctity. Now that sounds really strong, but I'm just trying to speak to like what is known. And I know a number of people now, Haley, who are on their third marriage.
Oh yeah, I know.
Right? You probably do too. So
Yeah.
that is like, wow.
And
okay.
then here's where I go, right? Because of course I think, well, the first two didn't work out. What makes you think the third one's going to?
Yeah.
And then I feel very judgy.
Yeah.
So, who am I to judge, right? Because we are called to not judge either. And even looking at some people who, they go into marriage and you do think they're taking it very casually. Well, who am I to judge that too?
Yeah.
But you've probably been to weddings where you think, okay, well, how long is this going to last? That's terrible. First of all, it's a terrible way to feel. Second of all,
right.
it's super judgmental. And marriage is hard, right? It's hard. That, that's the bottom line. But I also go back to, and I might have said this before, humans didn't live to be, 90, 100 years old.
Yeah. Right.
Way back when, right? We died at like 40. So to stay together for, now they might have gotten married at age 13, but to stay together for 25 years, it's probably the average, that's when people are getting divorced now. Well, I don't think we were called to be married that long. So it's a lot there, but it's hard. And I feel really badly for people who are struggling with their faith and are struggling for being judged, and I'm part of that problem. But I just, it's just, again, there's a lot of hurt out there. And I think to feel like your faith, which should sustain you and really help you through these hard times, it's got to be really hard to struggle with that part of it too, right? To have, kind of your faith foundation, which helps us through most problems and struggles. If you feel like that isn't there for you, that's got to be hard as well. Now, thankfully, I think there are more resources than there used to be, for divorced persons. But just another reminder of, again, the hurt that's out there. We've talked a lot about mental health, and I know today or yesterday, I believe, is World Mental Health Day. And so, of course, that's always on our mind. But, people struggling in their marriages and families, that's, and again, you're right, the impact it has on children is all a very real struggle as well.
Yeah. Well, and, maybe because it is something so beyond us, that's where faith can also help, is it's like, there's times where on a daily basis, like I'm sure people want to leave, they want to be out, they want to be free of this. And it's like, the reality is like everything in life goes through cycles and seasons. And like, sometimes it is just, working it out, writing it out, whatever that means, and like being selfless, putting that other person, maybe giving them a little more time, or, my parents always talk about the vows, like the power, like what that means, the covenant of the relationship, and just the respect for that. And I also think that's really important for other people in society, like for us to respect your marriage and like support our siblings, our friends in their marriages, and whatever that means, like, encouraging people to go on a date night, or, finding time, whatever it means for you to enrich your marriage. Like, how can we help each other in that? I don't have the answers to that, but I think that's part of, our lives of faith.
Well, and I think like anything, there is no one answer, but I think awareness and just understanding is I think the best we can do right now.
but yeah, it hits home when it's friends like that and when it's that
Yeah.
many. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's speaking to a truth that we cannot deny, right? And that's what
Right.
I'm hearing there. So
Yeah.
prayers for them. Yeah, my piece of the stew is not divorce. It's something that I'm teaching, but I've thought about it because I'm reading this book called The Four Winds. The
Mm.
Four by Kristen Hanna. It's the shared read of Notre Dame Women Connect, and it's really good. It's fiction again, so yay fiction, even though I don't usually read it. But in the book, the father-in-law of the main character, he's talking about they live on a farm, and he talks about the land. And he came from Sicily, and now they're in the Midwest. And he said about the wine, I mean, the vines that he has, it reminds me of my father. It binds us, this land, to one another, or it has for generations. Now it will bind you to us. And he uses the word binding, and that stood out to me. He feels bound or connected to the land.
Hmm.
Binding is the root of the word religion. So religion is religio, and religio means to be bound to. So I think when
Huh.
at its best, religion binds us, right? It connects us. And binding, as I was telling my students, can be suffocating, right? In some ways, if it's too tight, but it's rootedness and what keeps us, connected to something beyond ourselves. And that is a great way to think about religion. And in order to help young people understand that, there's a Jewish practice called tefillin, and I've only seen men use this prayer ritual. What it is it's some leather straps that you put around your non-dominant arm, and the leather straps have a box attached to it, and in the box is the word of God. So you bind the word to your arm, right?
Wow.
That does the work, right? And there's rituals, there's symbolism in the actual number of times you bind it. And then on the hand, you create the first letter of the Shema, which is the prayer that Jews say every morning and every evening. But then on the head is another box, and you put it above your forehead. It's like the third eye, which is like intuition. But again, that has the word of God. And it's really beautiful. If you didn't know it, you would think it looks super weird. But when I was in Israel, I saw it, and it's mostly Orthodox Jews, mostly men. But I do love the prayer ritual. Again, this notion of binding, like we are connected to the word of God, or in this book, The Four Winds, he feels connected to the land, right? And it was in Sicily, but now the land is that they live is in, the Midwest. So I don't know. I started to think about prayer rituals that I find meaningful, and I would probably have to spend a little more time this week, maybe for our takeaways of like, just to consider meaningful prayer rituals and what are you bound to? So that's kind of my question that I'll probably sit with this week.
Yeah, I love that. So I have not read Four Winds. It is next on our book club list as well.
Oh,
I
good.
do love Kristen Hanna. Have you read any of her books?
No,
So,
yeah, but I know she's popular.
she is, and I don't tend to like popular authors like that.
Okay.
Um,
Uh-huh.
she has a book called The Nightingale, which is set
Yes.
in World War
Yeah.
II. It could be one of my all-time favorite books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really, really good. But anyway, that's for another time. So I've seen The Four Winds, and there's one other one, The Great Alone. I know she wrote that people feel pretty strongly about as well. So I'm excited now to read this, as you mentioned it, and as always, I just love all of just what you teach me every time, Anne, with binding and bringing in the other faiths and sharing all that with me. So my takeaway this week probably will not be getting to reading The Four Winds because I still have another book I have to finish first. But I will think about I love meaningful rituals that we can do on our own quietly each day. As just a
Mhm.
reminder to ourselves, right? We don't always have to be, evangelical in our faith. We don't ever want to hide it, but I think those meaningful ones that we can do quietly each day for
Yeah.
ourselves
Hmm.
eventually do lead us to show more of our faith, our outward faith. So I'm going to think about that too. What am I doing every day that kind of keeps me grounded.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm doing that. So that's a
No,
great thing
right.
for me to keep in mind.
Hmm.
So thank you for that. That'll be a great takeaway for me in our melting pot.
Amen.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, my takeaways, I'm going to just continue to look for, I don't know, stories of inspiration. I mean, Hall of Fame is a once a year event and not everyone has like a Hall of Fame event. So, where is it that we're finding inspiration or, the gospel means good news, right? So I guess we have a source of good news in light of challenging times, but it's really easy to get caught up in these things that are difficult because they're real. So I want to just be intentional this week about, I don't know, I'm on the lookout for small nuggets of inspiration.
Okay.
We'll see.
That should work for all of us. Well, and by the time we connect next week, the Dodgers Giants series will be over, so we will be watching that this week. That will be one of my takeaways. Pay a little more attention to Major League Baseball. I will say my cousin, who is a St. Francis alum, texted me last night because her children go to the Bishop School in La Jolla, which is where Tyler Buckner, one of Notre Dame's quarterback, is from. So she sent me a text yesterday that said Tyler Buckner, the Bishop School, because of course he had just gone in and had the drive. And then I said, "Oh, I love that you're watching it." And then she wrote back and said, "No, alas, we've switched to the Giants game." So I wrote her back and I said, "That's acceptable because it's halftime." So she's a Giants fan as well. But this is what I love about sports too, right? It connects us. It just kind of in fun ways. But I will be watching baseball. I will pay a little more attention to it, even though my poor Orioles are in the off season. And I will be looking for the meaningful ways that are not sports related to ground myself in my faith this week.
Yeah. Amen. Good stuff. And I will continue to pray for people going through, divorce and just, to support people in their marriages also.
Yeah.
The other side of that coin.
Absolutely.
And again, ongoing prayers for mental health. So
always. All right.
Reminders.
Thank you, and have a great week.
You too.